All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on applying for a graduate fellowship grant via the U.S. Department of Education's GAANN program. This webinar is brought to you by the American Mathematical Society, and my name is Tyler Clofcorn. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of what we will be doing today. So for starters, I'd like to just give a brief overview of what the GAANN program is. It's a little bit different, as you'll see. I won't get into the specifics of some of the kind of submitting applications, but I'll want to point out some of the things that you might want to know if you're considering applying. Then we'll move into a panel with 3 panelists and a Q&A following that. I want to say that we have our 3 panelists today. So Tuncay Aktosun from the University of Texas at Arlington, Michelle Snider from Service Robotics and Technologies, and then finally Mark Walker from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I will let you know that we are recording this webinar and we will post it on the AMS webpage for the folks that could not be with us here live today. I encourage all of you to put your questions in the Q&A box as we go, and once we get to that Q&A section, we will address your questions as best we can. All right. Oh my goodness. I wonder if that's as jumbled as it is for you as it is me. Give me one sec. Sorry about that. I thought I had a jumbled slide there. Before we get started on the GAANN program, I just wanted to mention that the AMS has a welcoming environment policy. You can follow that QR code to see our welcoming environment. I just encourage everyone to make this a supportive and inquisitive opportunity for everyone involved. I also want to mention that if you encounter any particular issues and you'd like to speak with someone, we use the MathSafe program, and you can speak to an ombudsman at that phone number to the bottom right. All right, and graduate assistance in areas of national need. So GAANN program for short. The GAANN program is facilitated by the Department of Education, and the Department of Education basically gives awards to departments or programs and institutes of higher education. These awards are then distributed by the departments to graduate students as fellowships. And these fellowships includes things for stipends, tuition, and other expenses related to the program. Importantly, this program asks that the eventual recipients of the grant, the students from the particular programs or departments, they demonstrate a financial need. And then another thing that they require is that these students are pursuing the highest degree offered at the institution that they are at. So one interesting little quirk about the GAANN program that I wanted to mention is that, as the name says, this is graduate assistance in areas of national need. And the kind of operative phrase there is areas of national need. For the last 3 funding cycles or the last 9 years, the mathematical sciences, so applied math, and statistics, were not deemed areas of national need. And the 2024 notice for the GAANN program that has changed, i.e. math and applied math and statistics are areas of national need. This means that our departments in the mathematical sciences community are eligible to apply. And then finally, as I mentioned before, this is for institutions that are offering graduate degrees, i.e. master's degree or doctoral degrees. So how would you learn more about the GAANN program? I think I gather all of you can kind of Google things and kind of find the right place for this information, but I wanted to put it here for your any help you might need. Of course, you can listen to some of the kind of stories that you hear from our panelists, but the primary resources that you'll want to visit is the GAANN website, again, on the QR code on your right, and then the Federal Registrar's website for the GAANN notice for the 2024 call, again, QR code on your right. And then finally, if you have any questions, you'll want to contact the program lead, Rebecca L., and the email address at the very bottom of the screen. Um, GAANN is a little bit different than, well, what? A little bit different than some of the programs that you might be familiar with, in particular that come from the National Science Foundation. And so I wanted to walk through a few of those differences here to just kind of highlight what you'll want to be looking for when you look at the Federal Registrar's website and try to submit a potential application. I mentioned this a little bit before, but the eligibility is kind of important. Unlike the Graduate Research Fellowship Program at the National Science Foundation, where the PIs of a particular award there are the students themselves, here the awardees are departments and programs. Students are not eligible to apply to Department of Education directly. Eventually, they would apply to a department who has received a GAANN award. An important part of the eligibility too for the students is that they demonstrate a financial need. Having a financial need is determined by the FAFSA. So students that would like to be recipients of a GAANN fellowship would need to fill out a FAFSA. A little bit on the financials that are a little bit different. So a project that a department or program submits, it's up to 36 months long. There's a min and a max on the amount that you can request in a given fiscal year, 100K and 750K, respectively. An institution must provide 25% matching funds for the project. And then finally, a student, a fellow, a GAANN fellow, can get a stipend capped out at $37,000. This is the amount of a stipend for the Graduate Research Fellowship Program at the National Science Foundation. The reason why we're using the word capped there is because depending on the results of the FAFSA and what's determined there, a student might not be eligible for the total amount of $37,000 because they may not meet the definition of financial need. Another interesting quirk of the GAANN program is its selection criteria. So the selection criteria is based on a point system for 11 broad categories, and you're seeing these categories listed here. The particular categories that bear the most points, I've highlighted in orange over to the right. And then I want to note that the total adds up to 100 points that a particular application can get. Although this particular year, you can get 2 additional points if you respond to competitive preference priorities. And again, that can be found in the Federal Register. Applications. Applications are not submitted through Fastlane, i.e. NSF's system for processing grant proposals and things like that. This must be submitted through grants.gov, and you must follow the particular instructions provided by the Department of Education. And you're seeing a QR code to the right outlining the specific instructions for how to do that particular bit of work. The 2024 application deadline is June 24th. And then finally, you should hear responses by August 22nd. So I'd like to invite our panel in to get going on some remarks and some nuances of what they experienced when they facilitated their GAANN program or recipient of a GAANN fellowship. So I'd first like to welcome Mark Walker. Mark, would you like to kick us off?
Sure thing. Thanks, Tyler. It's my pleasure to be here. I was asked to sort of introduce myself to start, and so let me do that. I'm a professor of mathematics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Been there for almost 30 years now. Our department's been very lucky. We had 4 consecutive GAANN grants starting in the year 2003 up until about 10 years ago. Our final proposal we submitted was actually unsuccessful, and then they removed math from consideration shortly thereafter. I should mention that early on, I wasn't really the driving force behind our department's GAANN grants. It was Roger Wiegand, who deserves a ton of credit for writing the very first proposal we had that was successful. And he administered the grant in the early years. At some point, I helped out with that process, and I eventually became a co-PI and then PI. And then I'd forgotten about this, but many years ago, back when I was in graduate school, I was actually a recipient of a GAANN fellowship as well. So I guess I have a very long history with GAANN. And then, so I had some thoughts about proposal preparation. Tyler touched on many of these things already, but I cannot emphasize enough the extent to which you should follow the instructions very carefully. That list of point values that he showed, your proposal will indeed be graded using that as a rubric. And if you don't obviously address each of those, however many 15 points it is, then you'll lose points in that category, and that can doom you. And I certainly know I've heard of colleagues elsewhere that were just baffled why they didn't get a GAANN, because they're a fantastic program and all this, but they, as far as I can tell, they just didn't follow the instructions. The teaching preparation component is one that I think you really need to take seriously, and it's maybe one that's a little bit unusual in a way. So the way we handled this at UNL was we had a supervised teaching experience the first year in which a GAANN fellow taught their own class as instructor of record. And that, of course, wasn't always the same. That varied as to when that occurred. That could have been well after they had a GAANN fellowship. Sometimes it was they'd already taught a class before it. But anyways, it was important to make that teaching experience a real one. And so we partnered with our local teaching and learning department, or whatever it's called, not department, but there was like a teaching and learning center, I guess that's what it was called at the time. It's been renamed like 5 times. So bear with me if I forget what it's called now. And they helped us set up, record the GAANN fellows as they taught classes, and they provided feedback, and they gave out surveys to the students. They sort of took care of a lot of that for us, which is very helpful, since it was difficult for us to do that all on our own. Tyler also mentioned the institutional match, which is 25%. That sounds really scary at first, but at least in Nebraska, that was almost entirely handled in the form of tuition waivers. So in other words, while a GAANN fellow is being supported on the GAANN grants, and I'll say a little bit more about the details of that in a moment, but while that's happening, the university, still gives them a tuition waiver, and they counted that as the institutional match, and that more or less worked out to 25%. So at least I think other institutions handle waivers differently, and I'm not sure this would work for everyone, but I know this worked well for us. If we went to our college in the current financial climate and said, hey, here's this fantastic grant, there's no overhead, and you get to pay 25% of it out of your own budget, that would be just a complete non-starter for my college at this point. But since it was in the form of waivers, somehow it worked. All right, and let me move on to details of administering the grant. So that'd be the next slide here.
Yeah, sorry. For some reason it's
no problem. I have my own version of it, but it is. So wait.
There we go.
There we go. So he mentioned, Tyler did the need-based aspect of it, and this is really complicated actually. So I think the last time we had a grant, I think the stipend was capped at 30,000, and now it's 37,000. In any case, our students ended up only qualifying for about half of that as a best case scenario. Some qualified for way less, like if they had worked in industry before coming to graduate school, or if they had inheritance or something. It really made it a much lower amount. But even at that highest possible level we saw for need, it was not really competitive. So the amount of money we could provide the GAANN fellows was actually less than our regular TAs would earn. Now they don't teach, so some students would have taken that deal, but in any case, the way we handled that was we gave each GAANN fellow just a very small teaching assignment in the fall semester, like maybe a 3-credit recitation or something, which gave them a little bit of stipend, and then they were on full GAANN support for the rest of the year. So for the rest of the calendar, for the spring semester and then through the following summer. And so then with the tacked on stipend and then the amount they qualified for, this made it more like the generous fellowship that I think was intended to be. And the positive side of that is you actually can support more fellows off the grant than nominally it appears. Like I think they say it should support 4 or 5, but we were able to support about 8 students per year from the GAANN grant, because it's the money is the money, right? If you don't spend it all on the students, they can just use more, support more students. If you try to use GAANN fellowships for recruitment, which we did to some extent, this is especially tricky because you have no idea what you're offering the student. You have no idea how much they're going to qualify for. So you have to kind of like, you can tell the applicant that if they apply for the FAFSA and they self-report the information to us, then we can let them know how much this offer is worth. But it's still a little bit awkward. And then a weird quirk. I mean, I think we tended to spread the wealth, but if you ever wanted to give a GAANN grant to this GAANN fellowship to the same student twice in a row, the mere fact they had this generous fellowship one year would actually affect their financial eligibility for the next year. So it actually, I think, was impossible for anyone to get a GAANN fellowship 2 years in a row because they just wouldn't qualify for enough. And then finally, the evaluation and reporting component, I think we found to be quite burdensome. You have to collect all this data. You're supposed to track all this information, to survey the students. We actually had, as a member of our GAANN grant proposal, someone from outside the department that was sort of an expert on evaluation. I think she also worked for the Teaching and Learning Center. So that helped. But if you don't have someone like that, you'll have to do it all yourself. And then it was a lot of work for our staff to track all this data. I mean, the anecdote I always tell is when the GAANN program stopped including math, I think the staff in the department greatly relieved. Okay, that's all. Those are my thoughts, and I hope they were helpful.
Thank you, Mark. Greatly appreciate it. All right, Tuncay, let me move to your slides. Go for it, sir.
Well, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Tuncay Aktosun, a professor of mathematics at the University of Texas at Arlington. We're located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In fact, Mark has summarized everything so well that I'm only going to be providing some supplemental details related to our own institution. May I have the next slide, please, Tyler? Well, I arrived in our department in 2005, and without knowing what we were doing, so we got together with all our colleagues and tried to make some improvements. In fact, we had 2 young faculty members who got their PhDs from Nebraska, and I was reading one of them. One of those faculty members' 10-year promotion application, and he mentioned GAANN. Well, I said, this is an excellent opportunity. Let's apply for a GAANN grant. So in 2006, we submitted a GAANN proposal, and it was funded. And then we had 4 consecutive GAANN grants. In 2006, we submitted one, 2009, 2012, and 2015. And well, then the education department secretary decided that mathematics was no longer in an area of national need. Well, we were devastated, but there was nothing that we could do. So we contacted our colleague, and I'm grateful to Bill Velez, Karen Sachs, and the American Mathematical Society. So they talked to all the politicians and convinced them that mathematics is not only the queen of all sciences, but is indeed an area of national need. So this year, then, in fact, we will be submitting a GAANN application. Now, it is important that the department chair and the graduate director and the key people who are dealing with graduate students are involved. Fortunately, in our case, all those people are involved. So I'm involved, my department chair is involved, our graduate director is involved, and also we have the Graduate Affairs Committee. So 2 key people from that Graduate Affairs Committee are involved. So basically, in the department, everything that we need to consult about graduate affairs, so we have the key people. Now, when we apply, and also when anyone applies, you basically specify the number of federal fellows. So as probably you know, for each fellow, you request $37,000 per year stipend, and plus the educational allowance, and that educational allowance, I believe, is of the order of 16,000, maybe a little bit more than 16,000. And then, as Mark mentioned, there's at least 25% match by the institution, and that can be in various forms. And usually, for example, in our case, we say, well, we request funding for 5 federal fellows, and then we will support 1 additional fellow by our institutional funds. Certainly with the understanding that, well, the funds from the federal funds can be used for the non-federal fellow or vice versa. The non-federal funds, institutional matching funds, can be used on the federal fellows. Next slide, please, Tyler.
I'm trying. There we
go. Yes, so this is an excellent program if you have, well, you're able to support domestic students, low-income students, and underrepresented minorities. Well, initially, we didn't have too many of them, but now our department is full of domestic students, low-income students, and underrepresented minorities, and partly thanks to grants like GAANN. And so even though each time we requested 4 federal fellows and maybe matched with the 1 non-federal fellow, so or sometimes 5, so we should have supported between 16 and 20 fellows at most. As Mark mentioned, the stipend that we pay is determined by the maximum of the fellow's unmet financial need and $37,000. So as a result, we ended up supporting 53 PhDs. So we awarded 53 PhDs. So if you cannot pay $37, that's fine. That's understood. So you can just support more students. And well, and women are always, there are fewer women than men. And this was an excellent opportunity also for us to recruit women to our PhD program. And so we are still interested in recruiting more women. So we among the 43 PhDs awarded to GAANN fellows, in fact, the first PhD was in 2008. So since 2008, 53 PhD degrees awarded to our GAANN fellows from our department. So there were 19 women and 19 underrepresented minorities. But this year, the education department decided that Asian Americans are also underrepresented minorities. Well, we know that a National Science Foundation considers Asian Americans overrepresented minority, but this year things have changed. But the fellows that we supported were mainly of American Vietnamese. So we then supported, it turned out that we supported 24 underrepresented minorities as PhD recipients. And well, we learned a lot about mentoring and supervised teaching. In fact, well, we learned also how to interact with the staff in our university. And initially, believe me, the staff at the financial aid office, grant office, and other offices, they were very hostile. I guess that they always thought that the faculty always dictated, do this, do this. But then we invited them, so we met them face to face, and we were arranging some GAANN days, and we were presenting some awards to the staff. So now everything works very well. So whenever I need something, I know the key people, and so that has been really a good blessing. So in that sense, please treat those staff members well, because with good relationships, you can get a lot out of them. And also be involved, our graduate students and also our GAANN fellows, in a lot of outreach activities. So we are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so we're close to the city of Fort Worth. Well, the city of Fort Worth is like the tale of two cities. So there are very poor schools and very rich schools. And so we collaborated, for example, with the Rotary Club of Fort Worth and other organizations. And we were inviting all the students from some middle schools, and our GAANN fellows really loved that, and they started doing their own outreach activities. So this is one way to keep graduate students and also especially minority graduate students, they feel that they have a sense of belonging because they reach out and help students, future students who are like them. The next slide, please. So as far as the managing GAANN resources are concerned, well, so I closely worked with our department chair and also with the other units. Well, we're not a rich institution, and sometimes when I talk to colleagues in other rich universities, they say, well, please come to our graduate program, PhD program, try it for 1 year. If you don't like it, then it's okay. Well, this is different in our case. So our relationship with our graduate students is like those old Asian Indian marriages, no divorce at all. So they are going to be committed. We are committed. In fact, the good thing is that anyone who comes to our department, to our PhD program, leaves with a PhD degree. So we don't water down. So faculty suffer with them, help them. And also this helps us to use 100% of our money on the graduate students. And as I mentioned, it's very important to have good relationships with the financial aid officer, because the determination of each fellow's financial need will be determined by them. Well, since we are also running an undergraduate STEM program, so we have an excellent experience of understanding of low income and unmet financial need, cost of attendance, FAFSA, etc. And so we have a pretty good way to work to admit fellows. So basically, we asked 3 questions. In fact, this should be done in admitting graduate students. Well, is this person going to get a PhD? Is this person going to get a PhD from our institution? And is this person going to get a PhD in a timely manner? So I mean, if you can answer yes, then it's fine. So certainly, I guess we admit people who will do well and who will get their degrees. And our philosophy is, well, certainly this is Bauer, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, we firmly believe in this, because if you get a person, and if you don't graduate that person, if that person gets a negative experience, most likely you then force the person not to get a PhD degree at all. And as I mentioned, our goal is to use our resources, our valuable resources, so that 100% is used to graduate our fellow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tuncay. Really appreciate it. Michelle, over to you.
All right. So hello, I'm gonna be a little bit different than your previous two panelists here. So I'm here as the awardee. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of idea about my background. So I went to Smith College, graduated in 2004. So I majored in physics, and then I kind of just added in a math major during my senior year. So I didn't have the most robust mathematics undergraduate experience because I kind of just decided at the last minute. Fortunately, UC San Diego was willing to take me on as a graduate student. So I started there. I did my qualifying exams there. I advanced to candidacy. And then around 2008, I followed my advisor to Cornell. And I was able to finish my research at Cornell and get my PhD there in algebraic combinatorics. After that, I moved to Maryland to start as a research staff member at the IDA Center for Computing Sciences. This is a not-for-profit research center. It primarily hires math and computer science PhDs to work on problems of interest for national security. So I spent 10 years there. And then in 2021, I joined a small tech startup called Service Robotics Technologies as a senior data analyst. And I've been working there ever since. So I put this together just to say you can see I have had a wildly successful mathematical career, all stemming from the fact that I did not fail out of graduate school. So next slide. I think it's fair to say it was not obvious to me that was going to be the case my first couple years of grad school. So as I said, I had been a physics major originally and just sort of crammed in a bunch of math in my very last year as an undergrad and decided right when I decided to go to graduate school. So I felt like I barely had the prerequisites and not a lot else. So at UCSD, and I put in 2004 because I don't actually know if this has changed, but you had to pass 3 qualifying exam classes in your first year. So most people would take 2 their first year, they would take 1 their second year while they were, looking for an advisor, be on track to get out of there in, 4 years, optimally, possibly 5. But yeah, super well-prepared people might have even taken a qual before the fall semester of their first year even started. So I tried that. I tried to take 2 exams. And within my first quarter, realized that I did not have the preparation for it. And I dropped down and started taking undergraduate classes. But the rule just said I had to pass 1 by the end of my first year. So I managed to do that. And then I kind of stumbled into my second year being like, well, I haven't failed out yet, so I guess I'll just keep going. So worked out very nicely that UCSD then gave me the GAANN my second year, which came with more money and extra support to help purchase a computer. But more importantly for me at the time, I think, was the reduced teaching requirement that I was able to then focus that extra time and energy on my coursework, enabling me to pass all of my quals. Huzzah, right? So once I got through that, was able to then, continue on and actually graduate. So next slide. So I didn't ask a lot of questions at the time, right? They said, here's some money and you don't have to teach. So I just didn't really ask questions. But in preparation for this, I reached out to a number of contacts at UCSD and other graduate students who were there at the time. But given that it's been 2 decades and the people who were the PIs on the GAANN I was not able to get in contact with them. People were a little bit fuzzy on the details of how the program was run. So I just did some Googling to try to even figure out how many years they got it. So they may have gotten it more years than that. I'm not sure. But I think that my haphazard research, I think I can say that the UCSD was using the GAANN primarily as a means of improving offers for female and underrepresented minority candidates. By reducing the TA requirement, they were able to make themselves more attractive to students who might go to a competitor school that had lower teaching requirements than UCSD did in general. And the GAANN did not only go to those populations, but I couldn't get any other information on how they used it. But I can say that every domestic female graduate student that I knew got it for 1 year, either their first year or their second year. Although how much of a teaching reduction they got seemed to vary a bit by year. I think it depended a lot on how much TA support the department actually needed at the time. So I might have just gotten lucky on that one. I would love to be able to tell a success story like Tuncay did, but I can't actually say whether or not it directly affected the percentage of women in the graduate population, as it looks like that the percentage has stayed pretty static over the past 2 decades. But I can say that along with several other GAANN recipients, we started the AWM chapter in 2007, and that is still going. So that's something. I can't say that the GAANN didn't contribute to that. If I had failed out, then I wouldn't have helped start it. So there's that. But I do know that, just for me personally, without that extra support at that really key time for me, I don't know that I would have made it through the calls. And so I fully support everyone on this call applying for GAANNs and supporting your graduate students going forwards. So that, hand it back to Tyler.
Thank you, Michelle. And we're going to move into the Q&A portion, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll put my email address in the into the chat box so you all can have it. But I just wanted, I'll start real briefly and with you, Michelle, and just kind of ask, what was the alternative for teaching? So like if in your first year, were you like TAing a class or were you teaching a class? Like what did that look like kind of first year versus second year? I just want to make sure I kind of understood the context there of like what GAANN actually gave to you in that second year.
I am not sure I exactly remember. I'm pretty sure that I may have done some TAing in my first quarter, but I definitely did not do it in my second and third quarter, my second year. And at UCSD, there were very few actual teaching opportunities. It was almost entirely TA support for professors of record.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm looking at some of the questions, and let me see if I see this is visible to some of you. I was wondering if we could get at David Feuder's question, which I'll kind of ask out loud to the group. And I wonder if this is like experiential, just kind of your experience with this, probably for Mark and Tuncay. But if a student has, say, $36K in income from TA REA support in year X, would that make them ineligible for year X plus 1? I just wanted to address that one real quickly. Mark and Tuncay, if you wanted to take that one.
I mean, I think it depends on many other factors because, as I mentioned, our GAANN fellows tended to be eligible for at most half of whatever the maximum stipend was. But that was, I believe, and I'm no expert, I believe that was a function of Nebraska's very low cost of attendance, which is one of the factors that goes into this calculation. Someone could tell me that's completely wrong, and I wouldn't argue with you, but that's my understanding. So, but at Nebraska, what I can say is, if a student gets 36K in income 1 year, then they would, I mean, they're not ineligible, they would just qualify for so little from the FOSFA form that it would be almost pointless to give them a GAANN.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, please go ahead.
Each student fills out FAFSA, I guess, at the Education Department webpage, and then chooses where the financial information will be sent. Each school has a code. Well, for example, if a graduate student wants to be in the mathematics department at University of Texas at Arlington, he or she fills out FAFSA, and then the information goes to the University of Texas at Arlington Financial Aid Office. And each university in each department or each program has a cost of attendance. And this takes into consideration food, tuition, health insurance, so transportation, etc. So cost of attendance minus, it used to be the expected family contribution. Now it's called the student aid index. So the difference is determines a student's unmet financial need. So we have nothing to do with it. And so the unmet financial need is determined by what the student puts as input at FAFSA, and then the determination is made by the institution, by the financial aid office. And in case there is some circumstances where the FAFSA filing did not take into consideration, the student talks to the financial aid officer and presents his or her exceptional case, and then a modification is made. And then the financial aid officer then tells me how much I can pay each semester to the student. So they say, in the fall semester, the student's unmet financial need is this. And in the spring semester, the student's unmet financial need is this. So then that determines the maximum that we can pay the student. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tuncay. I wanted to, let's see, I'm gonna bounce around a little bit. And I'm curious about Christine's question and maybe some experience there. And I was not able to attend the webinar last week that the Department of Ed ran, but Christine asked the question. It says on the website that the funding will be evaluated by August 24th, but I understand that the Department of Ed webinar last week that the funds may not arrive until mid-October. Were those your prior GAANN support? Were those with prior GAANN support able to use it in the first fall it was awarded? So again, back to Mark and Tuncay. I wondered, Tuncay, do you want to kick us off? Do you have an answer for that one?
Excellent question. In fact, I attended that information session. I asked this question. I said, look, you're telling us that the announcement will be made in October the 1st, no earlier than. So in the timetable in my application narrative, what date shall I choose? Well, in fact, about they recognized Rebecca recognized, I guess, me and said, well, so just do whatever you want. And so then I talked to, I guess, the grant officer, and then we decided to do the following. So since we had the experience, so I'm going to be using as the advertisement. So the advertisement for our GAANN program, I'm going to be claiming has started in April. And then the recruitment will be from August on till the end of the fall semester. So basically, my timetable is independent of what the Department of Education does. And in the worst possible case, I mean, if the announcement comes late, if we have to start the program in the spring semester, that's fine. But my feeling is that they don't care much about it as long as you present a good timetable. So that's really a minor issue, surprisingly.
Mark,
Do you have any experience with this? I don't know if you have anything to add on there.
to be honest, Christine, I don't remember. My guess is we were able to do something like what was just suggested. We probably were able to use it for the spring semester. As I mentioned, we actually had our GAANN fellows teach a tiny bit in the fall and go on full fellowship support for the spring. So I'm guessing that's what we did in the first year.
Thanks, Mark. And then I want to address a quick question from Juan, and he asked any commentary about master's institutions. So I don't know that we have anybody necessarily who's equipped to answer that, but I just wanted to double check with the group if there's anything to add here, or if you've heard anything from master's institutions.
I'll be happy to answer that. In case the department that applies for the GAANN fellowship offers a PhD program, then all the GAANN fellows must be awarded to PhD students. But if the highest degree offered by that department is a master's program, then the department can apply for the GAANN fellowship to support master's students. So it depends on that particular degree program that particular institution has.
And I appreciate that, Tuncay, and I think that answers Thomas's question, who says something along the lines, if the fellowships are intended for support for the highest level degree at an institution, does this mean that the bridge to PhD programs would automatically disqualified from funding? I believe the answer is yes, that's how I would read it. If you wanted to pursue that a little bit further, I suspect you could email Rebecca L, but I'm interpreting that as probably a disqualification. I wanted to acknowledge I've got our esteemed colleague, Bill Velez here. Bill, I wanted to see if you had any questions for this group. Bill joins us from the AMS Committee on Education, who helped work for getting the GAANN program back to accepting mathematics as an area of national need. So Bill, did you have any questions for this group?
No, I don't have any questions, but I just want to make an observation. It's mysterious how mathematics dropped from being an area of national need. And what that tells me is that we have to have continued vigilance and contacting the Department of Education to indicate to them how important mathematics is. In getting mathematics again registered as an area of national need, it's sort of mysterious to me, but how that happened. But I do know that both Tyler and Karen worked as in their capacity as in the Office of Government Relations of the AMS to contact DOE. So this is something that we have to continue to do. We have to continue to talk about the successes of the GAANN grant in mathematics, and we have to contact government agencies to make sure that they understand the importance of mathematics. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And I was particularly reminded of that in Michelle's last slide. Like I hadn't known about the AWM chapter at UCSD, and I love that story. That's like profoundly impactful for a graduate program and department. So I was really, really pleased to hear that from Michelle. I want to move on to Oscar's question. What precisely is, quote, matching funds? How can an institution fulfill that requirement? I think, Mark and Tuncay, I believe you touched on this a little bit. Usually that's swept into the tuition, but I just wanted to kind of a tuition waiver for the graduate student, but I wanted to just double check that I was thinking about that properly with you too.
Yeah, I mean, at Nebraska, we managed to make it basically entirely the tuition remission. I don't know if that's still possible. I mean, GAANN does provide this fund that's supposed to help cover the student's tuition, but it's not nearly enough. And so, unless things have changed, we were able to get away with it just by having it being a tuition waiver. Our college does treat that as real money. They repeatedly hammer home the point that, tuition is not made up money. Someone somewhere is covering that cost. So they do view it as a real expense.
Thank you, Mark.
Now, the match should be at 25% or more, but it can be in many forms. It doesn't have to be monetary. So, for example, as Mark mentioned, it can be in the form of tuition waiver, or it can be in the form of establishing an additional fellowship and paying the fellow stipend or other educational expenses. But there is, I guess, so the following is important. So this money is supposed to be new money allocated. For example, if in your department you have, say, 10 graduate teaching assistantships, you don't say, well, we're going to allocate one graduate teaching assistantship out of 10 as GAANN fellowship. So you need to have the 11th assistantship established as the GAANN fellowship. So in other words, somehow there needs to be a genuine contribution, but it can be in-kind contribution in the form of tuition waiver or fee waiver. So it doesn't have to be monetary, but it has to be new.
Thank you, Tuncay. Super helpful. Going through our questions a little bit, anonymous question asks, is the application process open every year or every 3 years? This is, I must admit, and I'm excited to hear from Mark and Tuncay on this, a little confusing on the kind of reporting online. The call for proposals happens every 3 years. It's on a 3-year cycle, but it does appear like sometimes people are invited to submit applications for money on the 2nd and 3rd year of that 3-year cycle. And I get the impression that that might be an invitation to people who submitted a past application but were denied, and then funds became available. But I just wanted to ask you all, my interpretation is open competition is every 3 years, and then there's a little bit of stuff that happens in between. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be happy to answer that. So, for example, there is a competition this year open to everyone. Next year, only those who applied this year and also in the next 2 years, they're not going to be a new competition, but they will be selecting the I guess the institutions to be funded among those who applied in the first year, but who were not funded in the first year. So as a result, I guess each institution has a shot every 3 years. And then I guess depending on what scores your institution gets in the evaluation, then they're going to be picking up, I guess, the funding, the institutions to fund from those who were not funded in the previous year.
And Mark or Tuncay, did either of you happen to get this actual scenario of funding in the 2nd or 3rd year?
I think that happened to us once, maybe, but it's been so long I don't remember. And yeah, the DOE just does grants way differently than the NSF, and it's always just seemed like chaotic to me. Like the proposal comes at the last possible second, you have to drop everything and submit a proposal. It's just that's the way it's always been.
Well, in our case, we were always lucky that we always got it in the first year. In fact, I should mention this, but please do not publicize this. So in the first time, I guess we were all amateur. We didn't know what to do, but we got a high score. And then when I reread what I wrote, I said, well, I'm glad that they funded us. But then we learned a lot. And then in the next applications, so I guess we became an expert. And then we said, look, if they don't fund this, what else they would fund? And so we were very lucky that most of the time, I guess our score was 100, 100. I wonder whether it was ever 99. So.
Thanks, Tuncay. I appreciate that. I am watching our time. We've got 5 minutes. I want to see if I can do some rapid fire through some of these questions. I'll get to this. This one from Greg, who asked, did you typically offer GAANN support for students in first year or during later years? And if it's offered in later year, did you see a large drop off in stipend caps based on financial need? I just wanted to summarize. I've heard that most of what I've understood from this group is that it was offered to first and second years, for a variety of reasons for help and kind of assistance as qualifying exams came up, but also for the financial need aspect of it, kind of assuming that they didn't have any particular large amounts of money coming into graduate school. But I just wanted to say real quick, am I hearing that right from this group? Mostly first and second year students?
I don't think that's actually correct. We did use it. We used some of them for recruiting, so basically first year students. But then I want to say it was typically based on if it was going to be a particularly valuable portion of the student's career. So I think it could easily have been a fourth or fifth year student that got it.
Thank you.
Well, the fellowship can be awarded at any stage, so it doesn't have to be the beginning student. And as I mentioned, being not a very rich institution, so we're interested in using our resources in the optimal way. So I need to know that the student will pass the prelim or qualifying exams. So basically, I'm asking myself, is this student going to get a PhD? Is this student going to get a PhD in a timely manner? So this means that is this student going to get a pass the prelims, for example? So, I mean, if I feel that the student is bright, that there will be no problem, so I wouldn't mind funding in beginning student. But on the average, for example, if you fund students who have just passed the prelims, so I assume each institution has the appropriate criteria whether the student will get a PhD to predict that whether the student will get a PhD or not, certainly under the appropriate supervision. So once you answer that this positively, then you can just fund the student at any stage.
Yeah, so at UCSD, I think it was primarily first and second year students because they were primarily using it as a recruiting tool. So.
Thanks, Michelle. So I want to see real quick, it's kind of an interesting question. So from Catherine, this will be our last one. I see Mark is going to write a response to Christine's question about GAANN proposals and review feedback. But Catherine asks, if a student receives, say, $36K in their fifth year of a PhD program, needs to stay for a sixth year, but the institution cannot offer them funding for a sixth year, would they be eligible to receive the GAANN for their sixth year? Mark, any thoughts on that particular one?
Again, it depends a lot on the cost of attendance. So in Nebraska, they would under that exact scenario, they would have qualified for so little that it would be on this list. But I mean, there's no. If you're asking if it's possible to give them support for a sixth year with GAANN in principle, even because the department is no longer willing to support them, I think that is in principle possible. It's just a matter of how much they qualify for.
Thank you. With that, I want to offer a big thank you to Mark, Tuncay, and Michelle for willingness to answer some questions about an unusual program, one that's a little different from NSF. And just thank you so much for putting together slides and taking these questions and putting together these remarks on short notice as we were responding to a very short timeline for an application window for GAANN. It opened in April and closes in June. With that, thank you all very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday, and you'll see an email from me as a follow-up with a pointer to the recording and to kind of an email from me if you have any further questions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.